The European League phases are upon us. Yes, I said league phases. They have changed from groups of 4 to a league of 36 teams. Play 8 games against 8 different opponents. 2 teams are drawn from each spot. And for those in the Champions League and Europa League, you are still playing into January. The Conference League still has the 36 team league, but you only play 6 games. No idea why it's different, but this is UEFA. Does anything they do make sense? With that tangent out of the way, we have Celtic in the Champions League, Rangers in the Europa League, being sent to work the coefficient mines once again, and Hearts in the Conference League, with St Mirren being knocked out in the qualifiers by Brann, and Kilmarnock being knocked out by Copenhagen at the playoff stage, both in the Conference League. In the era before giant multi-billion TV deals increasing the inequalities between leagues, Scottish teams were consistently competitive, with teams making finals, semi-finals, quarter-finals, and even winning said competitions. So, in this video, we'll be going through every Scottish team that has qualified for Europe and going through their finest European nights. When it comes to what competitions count for this video, we're including the Champions League / European Cup, Europa League / UEFA Cup, Conference League, Cup Winners' Cup, Intertoto Cup, and Super Cup. Should point out that this is also just for men's competitions, so there won't be Glasgow City's 4-2 win against Zurich to reach the quarterfinals of the Women's Champions League. So, with all of that out of the way, let's get into this, shall we? Aberdeen, Real Madrid, 1983. Probably the most obvious answer for Aberdeen, we have their 2-1 win in Gothenburg against Real Madrid in the 1983 Cup Winners' Cup final. Aberdeen got to the final thanks to wins against Sion of Dinamo Tirana of Albania, Lech Poznan of Poland, Bayern Munich of Germany, and Vortische Thorn of Belgium, before being pitted against the Spanish and European giants at Real Madrid. Real Madrid were managed by club legend Alfredo Di Stefano, but Aberdeen had their own legend in Sir Alex Ferguson, who was able to get the win thanks to goals from John Black and John Hewitt. It would be Aberdeen's first European trophy, with a Super Cup win against Hamburg a few months later being a close second in this list. In recent times, some of the more memorable nights would have to be from their 2007-2008 UEFA Cup campaign, where a 4-0 win at home to Copenhagen in their final group game saw them qualify from the group, which would lead to a knockout tie against Bayern Munich. A first leg 2-0 draw against the Bavarians was a great result for the club, but it was slightly marred by the away result where it finished 5-1 to Bayern, knocking Aberdeen out. Airdrie, Sparta Prague, 1992. Again, the most obvious result for Airdrie, as it was their only European fixture. After finishing runners-up to Rangers in the 1992 Scottish Cup, they qualified for the Cup Winners' Cup, where they would face, at the time, Czechoslovak side Sparta Prague. Both games would end in defeat for the Diamonds, with a 1-0 defeat at home and a 2-1 loss in Prague, seeing them knocked out. Celtic, Inter Milan, 1967. What is easily the greatest moment in Scottish club football history? We have Celtic winning the European Cup against Inter Milan in 1967. Celtic got to the final by beating Zurich of Switzerland, Nantes of France, Vojvodina of Yugoslavia, and Dukla Prague of Czechoslovakia, before facing off against Italian giants Inter Milan. Inter were favourites for the competition, and got to the final thanks to wins against Torpedo Moscow of the Soviet Union, Vasas of Hungary, competition holders Real Madrid, and CSKA Red Flag, better known as CSKA Sofia, of Bulgaria. Inter had also won 2 of the last 3 European Cups, and were known for their catenaccio style of play, with many games being slim wins, but they very rarely conceded. Celtic, meanwhile, were a bit more free-flowing, with Jockstein's side scoring 16 goals en route to the final versus Inter's 10. Inter would take the lead thanks to a penalty in the 6th minute, but goals from Tommy Gemmell and Tommy Chalmers saw the Glasgow side triumph. Not only was Celtic the first British side to win the European Cup, their squad was also incredibly local. The Lisbon Lions, as they came to be known, were made of entirely Scottish players, with all but 2 of them being born within 10 miles of Celtic Park, with Bobby Lennox being from Saltcoats in North Ayrshire, and Tommy Gemmell being from Motherwell, which was 11 miles, so just about misses out on that 10-mile criteria. Other memorable moments for Celtic include beating Leeds United home and away in the 1970 European Cup semi-final, beating Liverpool in the quarter-finals of the UEFA Cup in 2003, beating Manchester United thanks to a Shinsuke Nakamura free kick, and of course, the 2-1 win against Barcelona in 2012, which had the statistic page straight out of a prime Football Manager defeat. Dundee. Anderlecht 1962. Dundee went through a golden era during the 1960s and 70s with multiple trips to Europe, but the 1962-63 European Cup run is the pinnacle of that time, and from that run, I have chosen their quarter-final against Belgian side Anderlecht. Anderlecht in the previous round had knocked out Real Madrid, but Dundee run their own incredible run of form in the competition. The game being a quarter-final fixture drew such a large amount of attention, the game was moved from Anderlecht's own stadium to the National Stadium at Hazel, which would see a crowd of just under 65,000. Dundee, however, would spoil the Belgians' day with an emphatic 4-1 win, all but seeing them through to the semi-finals, something that would be confirmed after a 2-1 win at Dens Park. This European Cup run had plenty of moments to choose from, such as an 8-1 win at home to Köln, a team that had 10 West German internationals in it, a 4-1 win at home against Sporting Club de Portugal, and a 1-0 win in the semi-finals at home against AC Milan. But it wasn't enough to overturn a 5-1 defeat in the first leg. Dundee would also face off against Milan in the 1971-72 UEFA Cup, but again, a win at home wasn't enough to overturn a defeat in Milan. Dundee United. Roma 1984. Dundee United are one of the most successful sides in Europe when it comes to Scottish clubs, with the 4th most wins in European fixtures. The pinnacle of this has to be their first leg win in the semi-finals of the European Cup against Roma back in 1984. Dundee United got to this point by beating Maltese side Hammer Spartans, Belgian side Standard Liège, and Austrian side Rapid Vienna before coming up against the Italian champions. With the first leg being at Tannadice, United would win 2-0 thanks to goals from Davy Dodds and Derek Stark, giving the Arabs a chance at being the first Scottish side to reach the European Cup final since Celtic faced off against Feyenoord in 1970. Whilst this game in itself is surely United's finest moment, the second leg is something of a tragedy, as Roma would win the return leg 3-0. This sounds like Dundee United collapsed in the second leg, but this wasn't necessarily the case, as Roma would later admit to attempting to bribe the referee. Outside of this European Cup run, other notable victories include both legs against Barcelona in 1966 and 1987, a semi-final victory over Borussia Mönchengladbach in the 1987 UEFA Cup, and in more recent times, a 1-0 win over AZ Alkmaar in the Conference League back in 2022. We don't talk about the away leg. Dunfermline. Slovan Bratislava 1969. Over to Fife now, and we have Dunfermline Athletic, who have a fairly solid record in Europe. The Pars have qualified for Europe 9 times, 7 of those being in the 1960s, and it's the 1968-69 season where we have their fixture against Slovan Bratislava. Dunfermline were competing in the Cup Winners' Cup after winning the Scottish Cup in 1968, which led to this run to the semi-finals. They were up against Slovan Bratislava of Czechoslovakia, and in the first leg at East End Park, a crowd of 25,000 saw Jim Fraser put Dunfermline 1-up going into half-time, but Slovan would get an equaliser 7 minutes before full-time. Whilst Dunfermline would lose 1-0 in the away tie, considering Slovan Bratislava went on to beat Barcelona in the final, it's a pretty good result. Other options include the 5-1 win against Valencia, seeing the Pars overturn a 4-0 defeat in the first leg, something that wouldn't be repeated until Barcelona came back against PSG. And their other games from their run to the semi-finals include a 10-1 win against Apoel Nicosia of Cyprus, a 4-0 win against Greek side Olympiakos, and a 1-0 win against English side West Bromwich Albion. Falkirk. Vaduz 2009. Across the fourth now, and we have Falkirk, who have only played 1 tie in European competition. After losing to Rangers in the 2009 Scottish Cup final, Falkirk would go into the Europa League second qualifying round, being drawn against Liechtensteiner side FC Vaduz. Ryan Flynn would score the only goal in the first leg in Falkirk, but the away leg in the Alps saw Vaduz win 2-0, seeing them progress. Whilst it does sound bad losing to a side from Liechtenstein, a nation that doesn't even have its own league, Veduts are European stalwarts, having only failed to qualify 4 times in the last 32 years, and have a respectable record. So to be put out by them in your first ever European tie, it's not as bad as people will make it out to be. Greenock Morton. Chelsea, 1968. Morton are another side to have only one European tie to choose from, but this time it was against English giants Chelsea. Morton finished 6th in the First Division, so qualified for the Intercities Fairs Cup, a precursor to the Europa League, but would be defeated 5-0 at Stamford Bridge, followed by a 4-3 defeat at Capello. Gretna, Derry 2006. If you already have watched my video on Gretna, you will know how this village side qualified for Europe, but if you didn't, Gretna were defeated by Hearts in the 2006 Scottish Cup final, but with Hearts having already qualified for Europe, Gretna would play in the UEFA Cup qualifiers. They would be comfortably beaten 5-1 in the first leg at Fir Park in Motherwell before drawing 2-2 in the away fixture. Gretna won't be qualifying for Europe anytime soon, seeing as the club went under in 2008, and the Phoenix club, Gretna 2008, currently play down in the Lowland League. Hearts, Bayern Munich 1989. Since returning to the Premiership, Hearts have been consistently qualifying for Europe, with games in both the Conference League and Europa League these past couple of seasons. For their finest moment, however, we have to go back to the 1988-89 UEFA Cup quarter-finals, where the Jambos would face German giants Bayern Munich. The first leg saw the Bavarians travel to Edinburgh, where Ian Ferguson would score the only goal as Hearts secured a narrow 1-0 win at Tynecastle. They were unable to repeat this success in Munich, however, with Bayern coming out on top with a 2-0 win. Other mentions include a 1-0 win away at Austria Vienna in the same competition, becoming the first British side to win at the Prater Stadion, wins against Bosnian side Siroki Brijek in the 2006 Champions League qualifiers, a 1-0 draw away at Liverpool in the 2012 Europa League qualifiers, and most recently a 3-1 win against Rosenborg in Conference League qualifiers. Hibs, Djurgården 1956. Not only Scotland's first European participants, but Britain's as a whole, it's the first European campaign that we go back to. Hibs competed in the first edition of the European Cup back in the 1955-56 season, but were here despite not winning the league. Aberdeen were the previous year's winners, but withdrew from the competition due to seeing it as a distraction from domestic affairs, so Hibs, who were runners-up in that season, took their place instead. Hibs would convincingly defeat West German champions Rot-Weiss Essen 5-1 on aggregate, helped by a 4-0 win in Essen, before coming up against Swedish champions Djurgården. After going 1-0 down in the first minute, Hibs would come back to win 3-1 with goals from James Coombe, Lawrence Riley and an own goal from Ake Olsen, seeing them win the first leg away from home at Firhill in Glasgow. Yeah, I don't know why it was played at Partick Thistle's ground and not, in Sweden, but if you do, please put a comment below. They would go on to win the second leg 1-0 at Easter Road thanks to Edward Turnbull's goal, advancing to the semi-finals. The semi-finals would see defeats home and away against French champions Rome, ending Hibs' first and only run in the top tier of European competition. Other notable games for Hibs include beating Napoli 5-0 at Easter Road in the 1967-68 Fairs Cup and a 1-0 draw with Liverpool in the 1975-76 UEFA Cup. Inverness, Astra Giurgiu 2015. This channel's favourite club to talk about. Thankfully, I'm not spending 20 minutes talking about them this time, as Inverness only have one European tie to talk about. After winning the Scottish Cup in 2015, they qualified for the Europa League, seeing them drawn against Romanian side Astra Giurgiu. Unfortunately, they would lose 1-0 at home and draw 0-0 away in Romania, seeing them knocked out in the second qualifying round. Kilmarnock, Frankfurt 1964. Kilmarnock have an interesting history when it comes to not just European competition but international competition, having taken part in something called the International Soccer League, but that's not what we're here for. Their first game in Europe is the one we are interested in, as in the 1964-65 Intercities Fairs Cup, they played against Eintracht Frankfurt. The first leg was a disaster, with a 3-0 loss to the West German side, but it was at Rugby Park where they would have their greatest European game. Despite going 1-0 down after 2 minutes, making it 4-0 on aggregate at the time, Killie would come back and win 5-1. Goals from Ronnie Hamilton, James McElroy, James McFadden and Jackie McAnally completed what was an improbable comeback to see Killie qualify for the next round, where they would get knocked out by Everton. Other notable games for Killie include a 2-0 draw at home against Real Madrid the year after the Frankfurt game, and most recently their 1-0 win away against Tromsø in this year's Conference League qualifiers. Livingston, Sturm Graz 2002. Livingston managed to qualify for Europe for the only time in the club's history after finishing third in the 2001-02 Premier League season. Unlike some other teams, they were able to make it past the first round with a UEFA Cup qualifying round win against FC Vaduz, albeit it was on away goals after a 0-0 draw at Almenvale and a 1-0 draw in Liechtenstein. The first round would see them play against Austrian side Sturm Graz and were defeated 5-2 in the first leg, played at the Arnold Schwarzenegger Stadium. They would win at Almenvale 4-3 low, and it's this game I've chosen over 2 draws against Vaduz. Motherwell, Ålesund 2010. For a club that has played 35 games in Europe, Motherwell were surprisingly difficult to pick a winner for this. They have 10 wins in continental fixtures, most of them coming against sides from Iceland, Faroe Islands, Northern Ireland and Wales. Not exactly glamourtised with all due respect. It was beating Icelandic side Breiðablik that led to a tie against Norwegian side Ålesund in the third qualifying round of the Europa League that we are going to be looking at. James Murphy scored the only goal in a 1-1 draw in Norway, but at Fir Park, Murphy would strike again, along with John Sutton and Jonathan Page to give the Steelmen a 3-0 win. The only other game that bears a mention is an 8-1 win against Albanian side Flamurtari in 2009, who 15 years later are... Oh, that's the Albanian second tier. Partick Thistle, Spartak Brno 1963. It wasn't just a game between Djurgården and Hibs being played at Firhill, as Partick Thistle have also had their fair share of European fixtures. Their first run in Europe is what we'll be looking at, as for the 1963-64 season, Thistle played in the Intercities Fairs Cup. In this short run was their second round tie against Spartak Brno of Czechoslovakia. Thistle would play the first leg at home and would get a narrow win, beating the visitors 3-2. It wouldn't be enough, however, as the second leg saw a 4-0 defeat in Brno. Other games include their 3-0 and 4-1 wins against Glentoran in the previous round, and in the 1995 Intertoto Cup campaign, a 3-1 win against Keflavik and a 2-0 draw against LASK Linz. Queen of the South, Nordsjælland, 2008. Queen of the South qualified for their only European campaign after finishing runners-up to Rangers in the Scottish Cup. They would be drawn against Danish side Nordsjælland and, for a second division side, put up a good fight but were ultimately defeated 2-1 in both the home and away games. They did however get praise from the Danish authorities, as the 850 Dunhamers who travelled were described as being a credit both to their club and to Scotland. Raith Rovers, Bayern Munich 1995. There was no other choice, was there? Raith qualified for the UEFA Cup after beating Celtic on penalties in the 1994 League Cup final whilst in the second tier. Raith were given Gotu Ittrotafereg of the Faroe Islands in the preliminary round and would win 4-0 at Starks Park, followed by a 2-0 draw in the Faroes. The first round would see Akranes visit Kirkcaldy, with Raith winning 3-1 at home, followed by a 1-0 defeat in Iceland, but still enough to go through. So, after 2 ties against clubs from countries who are relative middles when it comes to continental club football, who do Raith get in the second round? Bayern Munich. Raith were once again at home for the first leg, and by at home I mean Easter Road because Starks Park's capacity was limiting when it came to ticket revenue. Bayern would win 2-0 in Edinburgh before a trip to the Olympiastadion would follow for the Rovers. Danny Lennon would strike with a free kick just before half-time, however, creating one of the most famous images in Raith Rovers history, as every fan in the ground made sure to take a photo of the half-time scoreboard, as it read Bayern Munich 0, Raith Rovers 1. Unfortunately, it wouldn't last, as Bayern would come back to win 2-1 and went on to win the UEFA Cup that season. Rangers. Dynamo Moscow 1972. Our final club to have won a European tournament, we have Rangers, who won the Cup Winners' Cup in 1972. This was Rangers' third final in the competition, having lost the 1961 final over 2 legs to Italian side Fiorentina and the 1967 final to Bayern Munich. But after gaining their revenge on the Germans in the semi-final of the 1972 edition, they would face Soviet representatives Dynamo Moscow. The two sides travelled to Barcelona for the final, where Rangers would shoot out into a 3-0 lead thanks to an opener from Colin Steen and a double from Willie Johnstone, where, despite a spirited comeback by Dynamo, Rangers would hold on and win 3-2, becoming the second Scottish side to win a European competition. Rangers' long history in European competitions means that they have plenty of honourable mentions, such as an 8-0 win against Borussia Mönchengladbach in 1961, beating Valletta 18-0 and 10-0 over 2 legs in 1983 and 1990, beating Fiorentina on penalties to reach the 2008 UEFA Cup final, and the wins against Borussia Dortmund and RB Leipzig on their run to the 2022 Europa League final. St Johnstone, Hamburg 1971. St Johnstone made a bit of a habit in bringing European football to Perth with their performances in the mid-2010s, but their best game we have to go back to the 1970s. In their first European tie, they were drawn against German giants Hamburg in the first round of the UEFA Cup. Whilst this was before they won their European silverware, Hamburg were favourites for the tie, and it seemed as though it would end up going that way after the Germans won 2-1 in Hamburg. The Saints had another idea, however, with goals from Henry Hill, Jim Pearson and Gordon Whitelaw seeing a 3-0 win for the home side, seeing them through to the next round. St Johnstone would make it to the third round following a 2-1 aggregate win against Hungarian side Varsas, but would be knocked out by Yugoslavian side Željeznica. Other honourable mentions include a win against the Rosenborg in the second qualifying round for the 2013-14 Europa League, a draw against some tiny club called Galatasaray in 2021, and another draw away to Austrian side LASK Linz. St Mirren, Tromsø 1987. Our final European representative in this video, we have St Mirren and their win against Norwegian side Tromsø. Kenneth McDowell would score for St Mirren in the 3rd minute, and it would be the only goal in the tie, seeing the Saints through to the next rounds. St Mirren would come undone in the next round by eventual winners Mechelen of Belgium, following a 2-0 defeat at home and a 0-0 draw away. Other honourable mentions include beating Sparta Prague 3-0 at Love Street in 1985, beating Elfsborg in Sweden in 1981, and beating Valor 4-1 at home in 2024, their first European fixture for the Paisley side in 37 years. That's all for this video, and of course, I hope you enjoyed. Are there any other fixtures I may have missed? Are there any stories of games you were at that stand out to you? If so, then put them down in the comments below. Of course, liking, sharing and subscribing are appreciated. I should also point out that super chats are available if you want to donate with your comment. I forgot I had them turned on actually until I got one in the last video. Anyway, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next video. Bye.